All right, so we are recording. So welcome everybody, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon to the Urban Agriculture Lab that Sustain is facilitating. This is part of an ongoing series of webinars that we launched in June this year, part of our Transition and Recovery series. Sustain, for those who are not familiar, is a national sustainable and healthy food systems organisation. We're based in Melbourne, but we are a national not-for-profit organisation. We're a health promotion charity registered with the ACNC. We have been working in urban agriculture for a number of years, facilitating national urban agriculture forums, first one in 2016, the second one in 2018. And we are right in the midst of planning for the third National Urban Agriculture Forum, which will take place on the 23rd and 24th of April 2021, and the first ever National Urban Agriculture Month. This is an area of great interest and passion for us, as well as extreme relevance, given the time that we're in, the year that we are living through. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Wurundjeri and Bunurong peoples of the Kulin Nation. I'll pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, acknowledge any First Nation persons that are present with us on the Zoom today. So yes, a very warm welcome and thank you everybody for registering for this event. It's our intention it's going to be a really interesting and informative and engaging couple of hours. And to explain to you what's going to be happening, I'd like to hand over to our wonderful co-host, Bruna Iotta. Just a little bit about Bruna. She has accepted responsibility for her role in making the planet less precarious and leaving it better than she found it. Bruna has experience as a trainer and facilitator working with corporate sustainability. She's an experienced behaviour change professional in both private and government sectors, and also volunteers in the community, and making a difference is her raison d'etre. So Bruna has really approached me after our first two pandemic gardening survey webinars that we held in September and October, and yeah, made the generous invitation to work with us to take this forward in a this body of work forward in a engaging and workshop fashion. And this is the first of what we intend will be a series of similar labs going into 2021, leading up to the Urban Agriculture Forum in April next year and beyond. So thank you very much, Bruna, and over to you to introduce the what's going to be happening today.
Thank you very much, Nick. So I'm going to share my screen. Right. Thank you. And my name is Bruna. Nice to virtually meet you. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself. I've had many homes. I was born in Brazil, and then I moved to Italy when I was still a teenager. When I finished secondary school, I headed to England, where I spent most of my adult life, and I headed down under in 2018. Why am I here with you today? So I've always been fascinated by the natural world, and since I've become a mum, like Nick said before, I've taken responsibility for making this world a better place than I find it. But living a sustainable life is so hard in this current economic model, which is something that I'm going to talk to you about later. So pandemic has been a challenge for most of us. And I have been keeping busy in my local community, trying to protect the environment as much as I can. I extended my veg garden, and I even found time to finish a young adult novel where children are fighting to protect the planet. One last thing about me is my family and friends say that I'm eccentric. So if you do happen to laugh at some point, it's not because it's intentional. It's I can't tell jokes. So my family, you know, they say. I added these animations for my presentation for pause and reflection with a little bit of humor. And I hope you don't find them as annoying as I do. Some of the fast food ads popping up when you are watching an AFL match. So you are in a lab, but we're not going to experiment on you. What are we going to do? So we need each one of you from different backgrounds and different sectors to come together and form long-term partnerships towards changing the current food system. So today we're going to facilitate conversations that will bring about the food transformation. We learn by doing things, and this is what today is all about. For the next 2 hours, we are going to be all together on a journey, and I invite you to start with a curious mindset. So imagine yourself on a mood elevator, and you can't go down. Go down means being depressed, feeling frustrated, stressed. You can start from a curious level, going up the levels from curious, then being hopeful, creative, and grateful. Do you like, anyone here likes playing board games? I do. Online gaming, my boys do. So what kind of game are we going to play today? We're going to be playing the Participatory Futures. And this game is based on Nesta's Our Futures, by the people, for the people report. Nesta is a UK charity working all over the world. So this game is designed to stimulate ideas for more creative and engaging ways to have conversations about our common future. Nesta says that we cannot have 21st century challenges using 20th century mindsets and traditional models of public engagement. And we have modified this game to suit our conversations about the urban agriculture with you today. So do you know where your food comes from? Unless you grow your own food, which I'm sure some of you do, or you are very careful investigating your food supply chain, your answer is likely to be no. Like in this picture here, the more colorful the salad is, the longer you take cataloging each ingredient where it comes from. This is a busy image, and it's meant to be busy because it's depicting the reality we live in. There is enormous complexity in this logistics from farm to the fork. So do you think culture could have driven this? I told you before, I traveled a lot and absorbed eating tastes from different parts of the world. And sometimes I miss some types of food. For example, tomatoes growing in soil from volcanic activity in Italy. Is there a problem with this picture, do you think? Food production is responsible for 1/4 of world's greenhouse gas emissions. This image is courtesy of Our World in Data. And so here we've got transport, food miles. It's not all of the story being told here in the food miles. It's not what, we're just not talking about carbon footprint. Yes, it's a big part. I mean, most animal-based products are, like beef here, is the largest emitter with 60 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent per product. But if the transport, the food miles is not that big issue, there's no problem there importing food, is there? Or is there? I consider other factors too, not just the greenhouse gas emissions. I believe that as consumers, we can influence, but we cannot control how suppliers produce our food in other countries. I ask myself, what about the food production practices that suppliers, what are they using to spray? What kind of chemical they're using to spray my salad? What does the environment around the farm look like? Is there consideration for the animal welfare? And then I move on. Laws and regulations of the country where the food is coming from. Is there corruption taking place there? Are the workers being paid a fair wage? And lastly, the disruption to long chains, food chains, what we've seen this year with COVID-19. These are some examples you may add on to the list. So what can we do about it? What can we do to have more control of the way the food we eat is grown? We can start looking at urban agriculture in our cities. But before we get there, we need to understand how we inherited this complex food system. Is it perhaps to do with design, the design of our economy? I'm going to play to you a video that talks about economics. And this is courtesy of Kate Brayworth, an economist who believes that humanity's 21st century challenge is to meet the needs of all within the means of the planet. She called that donut economics.
In the 20th century, economics lost its purpose and started chasing the false goal of GDP growth. In recent decades, that has pushed many societies into deepening inequality, and it's pushing us all towards ecological collapse. This century calls for a new goal, meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. In other words, it's time to get into the donut, the sweet spot for humanity. But that's no easy task. Today, billions of people still fall short of their daily needs, from food, housing and energy to healthcare and education. And yet collectively, we've already overshot our pressure on some of Earth's most critical life support systems, driving climate change and the breakdown of biodiversity. What we do to this Earth in the next 50 years will shape the next 10,000. So let's replace that last century goal of endless growth with the goal of thriving in balance. And if we're to have half a chance of getting there, what economic mindset would be fit for the task?
So, did you know that the word economy comes from managing our own household, from the Greek? Caroline Steele is an architect and author of a book called Citopia. Has anyone read it? Citopia standing, as she coined it, food place. So, if we manage well our homes, we have a good grasp of economy. If we manage our homes well connected to nature, we have a great grasp of economy. Imagine several different homes doing the same within a city. How that city look like? Like a fried egg? Am I being eccentric here? Just a tiny bit. Architects are eccentric too. Architect Cedric Price is an example. He sketched this image to visualize urban development like an egg being cooked in different ways, boiled, fried, and scrambled. I ask you this, where's the chicken that laid these eggs? Some architects may have used food to illustrate the state of a city, but what about considering the complexity of food production and the logistics when designing cities? Caroline Steele, as I said before, she's an architect, and also she made this point in Citopia. How can we design cities in a way that considers metabolic flows, the inputs and outputs of food production? Something like this, food microgrid perhaps. Would you like to live in this self-sustaining neighborhood? I would. More than 50% of the food in this residential area is used for food production. The land of this is used for food production. This is a type of regenerative urban agriculture. But you cannot feed a city from within itself unless we close the ecological loop of returning nutrients back to the soil. We can look at one type of economy that mirrors its principle for natural cycles. What is circular economy? It's the opposite of take, make, dispose. It's where we regenerate nature. It's where we design out of waste and pollution, and we keep most of the materials in use for as long as possible. Circular economy is growing popularity. Some governments are adopting some of these targets to achieve within the next few years, especially in relation to waste. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation suggested 3 targets to achieve circular economy for food, which is shown here in this reinforcing feedback loop. Sourcing food regeneratively, designing and marketing healthier food products, and making the most of our food. So if we start looking at designing at the designing stage here, it's important to market the food products that people will want to eat, but choosing ingredients that are locally available and in season. Did you know that more than 75% of the food we eat comes from 12 plant species and 5 animal species? So diversifying the types of food we grow facilitates the transition to the regenerative agriculture here. And the product diversity and the dietary diversity improves our health. So to me, regenerative agriculture makes so much sense. What about food waste? Reducing edible food waste by only 50% by 2030 has a potential to reduce annual emissions by 1.4 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. So climate change is right here being tackled through food. Well, reducing is a start, but what can be reduced in terms of food waste can go to make organic fertilizers, which would be used for peri-urban farmers who could then not buy the chemical fertilizers. Try researching reverse logistics that talks about delivering the produce and collecting organic waste on the same trip. To conclude, yes, cities can successfully link up all the elements of the food value chain. I'm going to use Amsterdam as an example of a city adopting circular economy for food transformation. So what is making Amsterdam worry to the point of changing its traditional economic model? The Netherlands is the most populated country in Europe and geographically sits below sea level. So I understand that urgency, don't you? In 2015, Amsterdam released a roadmap to go circular. Their goal is to have the use of raw materials by 2030. And the transition to a circular economy requires multi-stakeholder approach and systems thinking. So it's so complex. Amsterdam believes it will take them 35 years to become 100% circular. So what is Amsterdam doing in terms of food systems? They established 3 ambitions: shorten food chains, provide healthy and sustainable food for its citizens, and ensure high quality processing of organic waste streams. So what are the barriers that they identified? If we look at this table here, for each strategy, there is a barrier. So if we look at culture, the circular economy requires a close cooperation between sectors and value chains. The successful cooperation can be best achieved if there is trust, good rapport, and a favorable culture. So how are they tracking? It's good to have a plan, but how are they tracking 5 years later? The hard work is paying off. The Netherlands lead in the race. And they achieved the circularity metric of 24.5 just this year in June. So the circular economy and the donut economics go hand in hand, and so Amsterdam incorporated both modes into its 2050 roadmap. The monitor, where this matrix here comes from, is the name of a measuring tool used to track progress for the circular economy in Amsterdam, and is based on Kate Raworth's donut model. If you look at this matrix and you read and you take time, can you feel the power of the word thrive in this matrix? Not grow the economy, but thrive as a society in equilibrium with nature. I believe that our greatest use of technology is to help us coexist with nature. We do not always need to resort to cutting edge technology to fix a problem. And at times, just using what's naturally available can give us more for less. I'm going to show you a little bit of this video explaining what Takao Furuno did to restore nature and make his family business thrive in Japan. In this farming technique, Takao mimics and complements natural ecosystems without breaking any planetary boundaries.
Rice paddies. The ducks have a dual role. They feed on insects and weeds, and their droppings enrich the soil.
Very cute duckies.
Their decomposing excrement promotes the development of plankton, which in turn feed the fish. Taco has found that an aquatic plant, the azolla, provided a natural and very important supply of nitrogen, an essential element to strong rice plant growth. Thus, the rice paddies can provide their own maintenance and protection without any chemicals whatsoever. This method also solves a major problem that threatens the Asian rice paddies, the Argentinian snail. It was mistaken.
It's a long video, but if you kept watching it, you would find that the ducks is gonna eat the snails, and then it's gonna make the ecosystem go into equilibrium again. So to conclude, to summarize, can the circular economy fix the broken food system? In principle, it can. It's up to us, but it's tackling climate change. It aims to restore biodiversity, create healthy cities, and offer sustainable livelihoods for us to thrive without harming nature. You probably saw this question already there on Mentimeter. If you can get a chance to answer it, then we're gonna release the results later. Thank you so much, and I'll see you later in the game. And I'm gonna introduce you now to Susan, our lovely Susan. She's gonna be presenting.
Thanks, Bruno. Do you want to quickly introduce Susan, and then Susan can share her screen and begin her presentation?
Yes. So Susan is the president of the community gardens in Knox. We both live here, and we've met this year. She's like me, very environmentally focused. She's a nurse and is very passionate. She's got the background Italian there going as well, and a mum. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to her presentation and for her becoming a councillor, hopefully in Knox. Yes, with very high chances, very high. Results to be released soon, right, Susan?
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Bruna. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Agri Lab today. I'll just share my screen. All new to this. Here we go. Share. Oh, sorry, slideshow. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Agri Lab. Like I said, my name is Suzanne Lawkins. I'm the president of the Knox Community Gardens. I've been a president for the last 3 years, which is quite exciting for me, but a member of the gardens for the last 10 years. So community gardening has been, and growing my own food for myself and my family has been a real passion of mine. Yeah, so that's about me. Yes, about me running for council. I've nominated for council in the local elections. So cross my fingers, results will be out in the next 2 weeks if I'm declared successful. Watch this space. Knox will become a, I'll be certainly an excellent advocate or a huge advocate for community gardens and urban farms and satellite gardens. Sky's the limit, we can do anything. Yes, here we go. All right, so I'm just going to speak today about the Knox Community Gardens. We're the third largest garden in Victoria. We started in 1985. We had our 35th birthday celebrations last year with an open day. So if you can see the image behind me, that's actually the gardens. Sorry, I'll move aside. That's us as a visual of the garden. So give you a bit of perspective of how large we are. We currently have 131 plots. So these stats are all pre-COVID, so complete change. And growing, which is really exciting. They have 152 members and growing. We're a committee of management, so made up of 10 members and countless volunteers, because you certainly need volunteers to, lots of people to be involved to keep an organisation active. It was quite incredible just going through a year, or a pre-COVID year, a normal year. We are exceptionally active. 34 events we would hold every year. Working bees, committee meetings, general meetings. We were starting to have monthly education sessions, which were just exceptionally valuable. Social events, everything really requires social events and food. Everyone loves food. We were very, community festival events were quite important to us to attract a new members, but also make ourselves available to the rest of the community. And fundraising events, like everything of a non-profit organisation, funds are quite important. With the COVID, we actually, with fundraising, we actually lost about $8,000 worth of revenue. So that's quite a considerable amount for our group. But, you know, these are our two lovely members, you know, friendships, that's what it's really all about, part of it. So where are we in Knox? We are, I'm not sure if you know much about the Out East, but this is Scoresby Road, Burwood Highway. If you can see my cursor runs down along the bottom here. This is the Knox Community Gardens just up the back here. We have two sections. That's the main section. That's the west section, or could be called, some of our members called it the Toorak end of the gardens. And if you follow my cursor, this section just in here where the vineyard is, and just that line there, watch this space. This is where we're going to develop. I'm not sure if anyone else is, just of curious interest, I put in the photo. I'm not sure if anyone else in this space has been heard of Lake Knox. This is a development that's happening in Knox, and this is a lake here. So if you're interested to learn a bit more about some an environmental issue that's happening here, look up Lake Knox and you'll find out about this this space here and Blind Creek. So we have remnant bushland in here, which is just amazing. So we feel actually quite fortunate to be sitting in this space in Knox. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our councillors of the time, the landscape architect, Mr. Dick Dare. And I love reading this quote because it is so as prominent in 1984 as what it is today. I'll read it out. The gardens will allow residents in flats and small units, now how appropriate is that in these days, without room to grow produce, to enjoy a pleasurable pastime. That's still relevant today. One of the principal themes of gardening is to give Knox citizens a chance to take part in educational experience in horticulture associated with vines, fruit and vegetables. So the vines in going forward will be removed. They are no longer viable, but it will go back to being a parkland, which is amazing. We have 170 fruit trees on the site and obviously all our vegetables that we grow there. So we actually it was donated by Dinsdale. So the space that we are on, which is just this allocation here, that's the gardens in those two spaces. It's the Dinsdale Public Park and Recreational Reserve, and we actually sit under Crown land. So it is state government land. We are permanently reserved as open space, which gives us some confidence that we will remain, but we always need to be protecting our space, which is quite important in these days. We don't want it to be taken over for housing at all. So like I said, these are just a few of our pictures. We have our good old scarecrow there. You know, the gardens would not be anything without the individuals that are within it and the individuals that come into the gardens and be a part of the space. In COVID, pre-COVID, we were expanding our waiting list. We had about a year waiting list, but it's been quite remarkable that over this last 7 months, our waiting list now is over 2 years, which goes to show how important this space is of urban agriculture and making sure we utilise as much space as we can for food production. Just to give you some like a bit of background with our COVID-19 space for the community gardens, we were fortunate enough all the way back in March to be one of only a handful of gardens from what I can understand. Please tell me if your garden remained open. But the gardens in Knox remained open from March and we still remain open today. We were never closed down at all. And that was important to recognise and have a relationship with council that remained that to open. So we understood our purpose and we were able to communicate that with council that, you know, under the 4 stages of restrictions, which we don't have now, exercise and the food supermarket were the 2 main things which are the reasons we needed to leave home and which is why the gardens remained open to members only. We did close it to the public, but remained open. We had an exceptionally well established communication strategy. So the committee's been working for the last 3 years to really get our governance and our processes working well. And they were invaluable in this time with communicating to our membership and with council, with MailChimp and newsletters, with clear instructions and expectations. So that was invaluable. I cannot emphasise enough moving forward with any community gardens is having a really positive, excellent relationship with council, understanding what council's motives are that will drive community gardens. So we needed to make sure that our motives and what we wanted to achieve really were the same moving forward. So we were flexible, the committee were flexible in what we had to achieve. We had great communication. We were always on the front foot and that has really helped us stay connected with our community and really been positive for our membership in COVID-19. The futures of the gardens, well, it's looking exceptionally bright for us. It wasn't always that way. In 2006, Knox City Council did have a master plan for this area, which was touted as medium density housing. Well, that sent everyone into a flat spin, as you can imagine. And the Community Gardens Committee at that time, until 2016, they really stayed low. Their philosophy was, if no one knows we're there, no one's going to bother us. Well, that almost was that was not a very good thing in this day and age. Where in 2016, this space was reviewed. The Knox City Council reviewed our space, and they decided in their report to put the gardens as an underutilised space. Well, we all know that that's not wrong. So in 2018, a councillor came to us and said, we've got a proposal for the gardens. And this councillor, God bless his cotton socks, decided that it was okay for the gardens to move from one space and move our whole garden space. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor down here, which was not acceptable to us. And a pivotal moment in the discussion for the committee and myself was a new migrant to Australia. He came and said, Suzanne, I come to Australia and, you know, I thought we could have a choice. We would have a choice what would happen to us, where we wanted to go. And it was that conversation and that pivotal comment that went, you know what, we need as a community to let the council know what was so valuable about our space. And we proactively engaged, promoted, networked, lobbied for a good year and a half, so that we've now increased our space. And the Knox Knox City Council are actually investing money into our area, which is really, really, really exciting. So if you go, now how can I go back? There you go. So this is what this is the plan that we've engaged. So like I said, the vineyards will be removed and that will go back to public space. And the community gardens has expanded. We've got an extra 2 acres of land now to work with, which is really exciting. So if you just keep an eye on that space, and this is our concept plan. So you're very exciting to pass off this concept plan. This is sitting with Knox City Council and the Knox Community Gardens now. And the council has already investing over $200,000 in this space, which is amazing, to remove the vineyards. So that goes back to playground. So the first stage 1, which has already been decided, is they're establishing a car park and entrance up near Kleinart Road, which will be our only entrance. So that's in the process now. We are actually going to have a boundary fence around us, which was important to our membership when we discussed these things, because it was about making sure that we had security of our space. So members could come in and out, and we weren't having vandalism of our gardens, our fruit and veggies weren't being stolen, our sheds weren't being vandalised and open. So we have a boundary fence now, which is really exciting. But what was really more exciting is a stage 2 of our negotiations. The Knox Community Gardens moving forward is going to be advocating for a propagation space just along this boundary wall. And we really see ourselves becoming quite like a social enterprise, but self-sustaining. We don't really want to rely on, we want to be able to make our own money that can then regenerate, and we can we want to be the heirloom tomato seedling space of the city, where you can come and get your spring seedlings and stuff. And if we can generate our own income, then we can become self-sufficient. And with that, then our income that we can generate from this propagation can then go into further redevelopment of the space. So we will be getting an Indigenous space, a cultural heritage circle, communal gardening, so then people can come together. extra plots for individual rental, and we are hoping to get a club room, which will then be a community space, a commercial kitchen for all our education spaces. So it's an amazing space that we are in. How did we get from being a community garden 35 years ago with 69 members to now where we are a thriving community gardens, which is expanding? Council are putting money into it. We have a 2.5-year waiting list, so our members, our community want to be involved with us. How did we get to that space? Well, you know, it's been an incredible journey in these last 2 years, learning about what resonated with our community and our own membership. And a couple of things that I have as a president learned and were pivotal is that it was so important to everyone that we were very true to our constitutional mission statement. And that must be the main driver of the decisions of what we did. Like the membership wanted to garden. They wanted to garden. They wanted a space to garden that was quiet. There was education there, so we're putting out our education. And with all of this, one of our other constitutional purposes is to help develop further community gardens or help develop other gardens. So hot off the press, we're actually considering satellite centres in Knox, satellite gardens, and that is already a conversation we're having with council, which is exceptionally exciting, that the gardens will be the mothership, as we say in, and we'll have lots of little satellite centres and gardens around us. So, you know, the whole goal is for every resident in Knox, you can garden within 5 kilometres of your house. What an amazing initiative that would be. Excellent communication strategy is absolutely paramount, but it's in 2 spaces: your general public, because you need them to remain involved, and your current membership. So that's something that we've been able to do quite successfully. And being inclusive with your communication. One of the things that was quite interesting in all of this was I garden because of food security, reduced food miles. I don't want any pesticides. I want a organic garden. That's my reason for gardening. But I can tell you, some of the older European gardeners, if I spoke to them about food miles, they'd tell me to go away. If I spoke to them about food security, they'd go away and say, well, we've always gardened. So I really found it was imperative that you change your language and the way you bring your membership along on how they perceive they garden and what was important to them. So there's no use talking to a 6-year-old European gent about food miles, because he would tell you that he didn't want to come with you on the journey. But when you talk to him about growing and you can go home and make your dinner that night, then that resonated with him. And that was one of the key things that was really important with bringing the community along with you in this journey, is making sure you talk to each member the right way, that what resonated with them, not what resonated with you. That was really important. And you know what was more important is fostering well-being. That's why people garden. They want to be with each other and form relationships, and that was has always been a huge thing. So we've been a success in the gardens in the East. It's been an amazing journey. Where we got our new tagline in all of this, where our community can grow, and it just grows in so many ways, from forming friendships, growing food security for our community. It meets so many of what we want, but ultimately it meets council's objectives, and if council's objectives have been met, then they're ultimately going to put money in you and support you. So that's really a key thing that I'd say about successful gardening communities. You really have to make sure you meet like the council's missions or who your key stakeholders are. So I hope you've been able to understand what we've done as a community garden. It's a good journey, and I hope as a councillor I can continue to have more community gardens. And please visit our website or Facebook and Instagram to stay connected with us. Thank you.
That's absolutely fantastic, Susan. What an amazing story. I think everyone will agree that, yeah, what's been achieved in Knox with you and your colleagues there is just extraordinary. So, you know, all credit to you and congratulations. And yeah, really felt privileged listening to that. So much insight and grounded experience that's been, you know, personally really inspiring and really informative. And I'm sure, you know, hopefully I speak for everyone here who feels the same way. So again, congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
And yeah, so exciting that you're going to be on the council as well. That's absolutely amazing. You know, not officially confirmed, I know, but looking very likely. So that's really, really great news as well. And the way you explained the links between your work as community and community garden and the linkage with council was really insightful as well. So absolutely fantastic. Now we are running a little bit behind time, so I've got a little bit to share with you just to kind of complement what Bruna and Susan have spoken about, and then we're going to have Stephen link this to the circular economy, which was the other part of the conversation today, and then a late inclusion to our program, not announced, that you may have seen, is Councillor Jess Miller from the City of Sydney, who's joining us as well. That'll be about 1 o'clock, and then we'll have a short break if people need to leave. Completely understand, but the next hour will be a workshop. We'll all go off into breakout rooms and workshop all this and develop scenarios for about 30 or 40 minutes. So that's what will be happening in the second hour. Bruno will be talking to us a bit about that before we have a break. All right. So I'm going to just try and be brief about this because we've already done a couple of webinars. If you want to go back and check out in more depth and detail the results of our pandemic gardening survey, you can do that. We've got that on our YouTube channel. Some of you may have been at the previous webinars. Some of you may have already caught up on the YouTube links. So I'm not going to go through this in any great detail. It's really just a bit of a recap and setting the scene for Stephen and Jess to kind of complement this into, you know, the bigger kind of like agenda of transformation, transition to regenerative, circular, just, fair economies and societies for the 21st century. So this webinar, this survey rather, for those who, sorry, I just skipped forward without meaning to. Apologies. Just go back one. Whoops. Yeah, the context of this was the pandemic, obviously. The work that we've been doing as Sustain, as I mentioned, on our Urban Agriculture Forum being postponed, wanting to keep momentum, and then hearing stories, you know, different to Susan's, about community gardens actually being closed and having a campaign to have community gardens declared essential, as well as wanting to capture the perspectives of Australians, particularly gardeners around the country, in terms of, you know, what access to growing spaces meant during these months of the pandemic. So that was the context for this survey, which received over 9,000 responses, and we've already got feedback from people in local government saying how valuable these results are in terms of affirming their work and making the case for, you know, continuing food systems, food governance, food policy, food security, urban agriculture programs and focus areas in local government. And certainly we believe that's absolutely required for an expansion of work in this area. So our big sort of call to action coming out of this work is this. We are saying there needs to be a massive scaling up of the sorts of things Susan's just been speaking to you about, for all the reasons that she's just explained, because of all the benefits that urban agriculture and edible gardening represents. We believe it's so important and so vital to so many people in this country that it deserves a major investment and push. So that is our campaign. These are some of the rationale for it. The cost, if we want to just kind of like put it in monetary terms, around $200 billion every year in terms of the cost of mental illness and dietary related ill health. Australia is notable for many things in a, you know, not a particularly positive way. One of them is the very low amounts we spend as a country on prevention in terms of our health budget. It's about 1.3%. That's less than half of what New Zealand, Canada, the United Kingdom and the United States spend on preventative health. So we see this Edible Gardening Fund and the Reform Agenda as really an urgent and necessary and long overdue investment in public health for Australia, public health and ecological health as well. Because, you know, as many of you here today, probably all of you, I appreciate it's a very informed and engaged audience, understand that the food system, the food and farming system, the way we're managing land in this country and globally is one of the biggest drivers of public health and ecological breakdown. That's what we're faced with. All these issues are interconnected across health and well-being, across equity and disconnection, and across the climate emergency, decline in biodiversity. These are all interlinked, they're all systemic in nature, and they all require an integrated and comprehensive program of action to transform them. So there are, as Susan already touched on, major implications for policy across all levels of government, but particularly local government. This is why we say local government needs to be engaged in food systems and urban agriculture, because these matters touch on so many policy and program areas, whether we're thinking about waste management, stormwater management, the climate emergency declarations, the transition to zero carbon ecology, municipal health and wellbeing plans, community strengthening, food security, and on it goes. For all these reasons, councils and state government needs to be engaged with urban agriculture and edible gardening. A quick snapshot of who completed our survey. Right around the country, 62% of all postcodes in Australia, 29% of the country's total landmass, rural and regional and urban communities, all age groups, a wide variety of people from cultural and ethnic backgrounds. And that was, you know, so it was a pretty representative survey, even though it was self-selecting. As well as being Director of Sustain, I also have a role teaching food systems and food studies at William Angliss Institute in Melbourne, in the Bachelor of Food Studies and Master of Food Systems and Gastronomy. One of the subjects that we've taught is urban agriculture. I've got a strong interest as a Churchill Fellow in urban agriculture and its multifunctionality. So these are just, and again, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this, but this kind of like looks at the intersections of urban agriculture and how it touches on so many areas of council activity. This is actually looking at the experience in Baltimore in the United States, some research that was done some years ago now. But looking at this, you can see just how relevant it is in the context of COVID and COVID recovery. You know, that urban agriculture and food growing in towns and cities just touches so many areas of social and ecological and cultural life. Really is extraordinarily multifunctional and extraordinarily multi-beneficial. So Baltimore, I actually went on my Churchill Fellowship to Detroit, a similar kind of post-industrial collapse scenario where you have a transition from an economy based on manufacturing, an emptying out of the urban framework, decline of manufacturing, this interesting spatial phenomenon where the city is coming, the country is coming back into the city, vacant lots opening up all around the place, combined with, you know, increasing levels of poverty, disadvantage, food insecurity, food deserts. And then the local government, the city government, turning that around through creating, using the planning mechanism to create a specific urban agriculture zoning and policy plan back in 2013. You know, creating access in supported ways to vacant lots like this, allowing people to grow healthy, culturally appropriate food, you know, for their own benefit, and to create social enterprises in the way that Susan was talking about is going to be happening in Knox. You know, a really fantastic use of public spaces, expansion of the public realm in really innovative and collaborative ways. These kinds of things are happening in places like Baltimore and in many other places around North America. And right around the world, there are 800 million people engaged in urban agriculture globally, producing about 20% of the world's food. So this is thinking it through in terms of, you know, what is actually happening in urban farms and community gardens, what are the benefits that leaders and residents perceive, and then translating that into policy and planning frameworks. So I'm just going to move through this very, very quickly. This is just kind of like some little snapshots affirming from our survey, reinforcing why this matters. The food security aspect is really, really important. The majority of respondents to our survey were actually below the average household income from Australia, and more than 25% of them were actually below the poverty line, below $50,000 for a family of 4. But they were the most productive gardeners. So that kind of explodes the myth that food growing is something that only hipsters in Brunswick do. It's something that it makes a huge difference for for people on low incomes and vulnerable circumstances, and they, with experience and support, are very productive, growing more than 30% of their own food, as you can see. And these are some of the reasons why these gardens matter for food security. The one I want to really highlight here is dignity. The typical approach in this country, as in other countries, for food insecurity has been to push money and food into the food bank sector, into emergency food relief. That is unfortunately necessary, but there's a lot of stigma and shame attached with accessing those services. It's far more empowering and dignified for people to be able to grow some of their own food, which is exactly what access to community gardens and urban farms permits. It's also great in terms of nutritional health and well-being and dietary diversity, because if you're growing your own food, you are going to be growing fruits and vegetables, typically, as well as herbs and often medicinal plants and poultry. It's a great form of physical exercise. So from a physical health point of view, it's really fantastic as well. Really, really important to people during COVID. Fully a fifth of the respondents to this survey said they could not have made it through the pandemic without having access to that space, for food security and mental health purposes. And just on that point of mental health, over 70% of respondents said that gardening activities result in improved mental health and well-being, as you can see there. The low-income gardener from Brisbane had a sad story to tell about being evicted from the house that he was renting, and he said, he puts that my garden was an extension of myself. I felt amputated and traumatized without it. It was my primary means of contribution to community, interconnection, my therapy, regenerative permaculture, my activism against the consumption machine destroying the earth. I fell into depression without it and felt suicidal. And we had 25,000 comments through this survey of people just pouring forth emotions and experiences just like that. It was quite extraordinary. Here's another one in terms of the therapeutic benefits of urban agriculture. This lady saying, with cancer, my garden keeps me alive, especially on the bad days. My greatest joy is seeing my grandchildren fossick through it, eating as they go. For me, keeping the garden going in times of stress is a way of asserting some control in my life, of establishing and maintaining some normality while the world spins out of control. Again, helping deal with grief, with loss, with trauma. Lots of comments about PTSD, about bereavement, all these kinds of things. Social connection, especially for people growing in the front garden, verges, neighbourhoods. Great way of connection, of meeting people and forming friendships. All reasons why council should have, more enabling and permissive policies about opening up the public realm in those ways, and supporting a mass expansion of urban agriculture, which is exactly what we're about. So this very quickly to finish off our action agenda for urban agriculture, based on, again, respondents saying the support they needed, particularly around knowledge and training, access to land, financial support, infrastructure. And I realise I've gone over my 8 minutes. Apologies, Stephen, but I am coming to the end. So very quickly, the roadmap, the 7 pillars that we've set out. Let me go forward. Sorry about that. Oh, maybe I am not going to be able to go forward to what I wanted to show you in terms of our roadmap for urban agriculture. We've got 6 pillars, 6 pillars of this roadmap, but it's seeming like it is decided at that point to stop. So anyway, I might finish here by just saying that the pillars are planning, urban agriculture, planning and land use frameworks, capacity building, education and training, financing through that edible gardening fund, infrastructure, access to infrastructure and support, embedding this in policies across all tiers of government, and governance and coordination. Those are our 6 pillars. So I will stop there, and I'm going to hand over to Stephen. Again, if anyone wants more detail, please visit our YouTube to see the full presentation of that webinar or get in touch with me. I am going to introduce now Stephen, who's going to talk to us about the intersection with all of this with the circular economy. So Stephen is the director of Polis Plan, and he is, just let me get this right so I give you a proper introduction, sorry. Yes, Stephen, Director of Town Planning Consultancy Polis Plan. He's been writing extensively on the future of cities and exploring how settlement patterns are being reshaped by distributed information and energy systems. He's qualified in civil engineering, town planning and environmental law, and currently doing a PhD in political economy at the University of Sydney as part of the process of co-creating a new model for village-scale regenerative land development based on the principles of the circular economy and the steady-state economy. So who better than to draw the linkages between food systems and circular economy? Thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks very much, Nick. And my presentation does build on all the presentations that have come before. Lots of connections with those. I'm offering a broader perspective in terms of building on this relationship between food and energy in particular, but how these shape our economic system and how this in turn creates a certain pattern of human settlements. And obviously the current pattern is of highly centralized, dense major cities surrounded by infrastructure deprived rural townships. And what we are proposing and advocating for here is a more distributed network of what we're calling circular economy villages. And these, of course, need not necessarily just be villages, they could be precincts within a suburban area. But where we integrate food, water and energy systems in and around the built environment. So if you want more information, this website, our website here, Butility Developments, that's blending beauty with utility, has much more information about us. So the starting point always, I think, is to lay out all the issues that I think we're facing, and we tend to deal with these sometimes in isolation. We sometimes draw some connections, but essentially think of them separately. And we are arguing that these are all symptoms of a systemic crisis, that all of the issues are interconnected and we need a systemic solution, a different system altogether in the way that we manage them. So how they're connected in terms of the food and energy systems in particular, this diagram is from a study done in the 1990s in the US, shows how much energy is wasted in the production of food. Thinking in terms of degradation of natural systems, if you're using more energy, if there's more energy input than there is output, then you're slowly degrading ecological systems. You need to have a energy input of less than 1 for each calorie of food produced. And we're clearly not doing that. And as you can see in the top left-hand corner, even just the production process is more energy intensive than traditional agroecology or permaculture systems were in the past. And so the consequence of this dependence on fossil fuels has also shaped our urban environment and significantly separated the agricultural production areas from the urban zone, allowed for the upscale and densification of the urban environment with a large urban footprint. People usually refer to the urban zone as the urban footprint, but I'd like to reinforce the idea that people in the urban zone depend on food production that is outside the city limits. So in constructing the city in this way, we've created what we can refer to as the linear economy, which is how literature in the circular economy distinguishes the current economic system from what we're trying to achieve. So the current system taken as a whole is a take, make and use and then dispose system. And therefore, the economic growth that is achieved for the centres at the expense of the outer areas. So essentially what we're doing is extracting value from other areas in order to create value within the urban zone. And this extraction of value relates not just to materials, of course, but to food and water and energy. And what we would argue is that we need to think of this entire system more holistically and integrate these food, material, water and energy systems within the system that we're creating in an urban zone. So if this is a linear economy that we have now, then a circular economy is one that plans for life cycles, and that includes human life cycles, what we need at different stages of our lives, as well as the life cycles of other species, also about holistic systems thinking and closing the loop to strive for zero waste. That's the principles that we would set for a circular economy. But if you have a look at the literature on a circular economy, there's a recent article that said that there were identified 114 different definitions for a circular economy. This article by Bowens that I think you would have received a link to in the introduction categorizes 4 different types of circular economy. The first type on the top left there is the Chinese model, and that primarily looks at eco-industrial parks where they connect different factories so that the output of one factory can feed into another factory, and then they put the housing around that and essentially are building new cities in this way. Then there's the circular modernism, which is the European model of a circular economy, which is led by corporates and all about maximizing profit, so that by minimizing the resource inputs needed. So both of these models both assume endless economic growth. The 2 bottom models, bottom-up sufficiency and peer-to-peer circularity, are more about demand management. And peer-to-peer circularity is the kind of Uber and Airbnb type model. So in spite of what they've become, the underlying principle is to share and use spare capacity within existing things that we've already created, whether that's housing or cars or land or whatever else. Use that spare capacity rather than making new things. So it manages the overall demand of production. And bottom-up sufficiency includes eco-villages, certain master plan developments, as well as principles like permaculture and market gardening and so on that are about reducing, about being more self-sufficient, which is the main focus of urban agriculture. And whereas Bowens tends to refer to these as low-tech versus high-tech, there's lots of high-tech stuff happening on the left-hand side. I argue that these are more place-based designs versus on the right, ones that have no consideration of geography. They're only about individual apps or economic activities on their own and not holistic thinking. So what we're proposing is this distributed network of bottom-up sufficiency plus peer-to-peer circularity. So you use the village that's connected to the landscape to manage your food, water and energy, the things that depend on the land, as well as the housing, of course. And then you connect to the broader network of similar villages for the more complex needs, or to share rarer skills, or to do things online that don't need to be done in the physical world. So that's what we're aiming for. And each individual village would be about integrating food, water, energy, transport and buildings. And the real game changer here is the fact that we can do an energy microgrid and generate our own energy that allows us to manage water much more efficiently and effectively. So we can manage an entire water cycle in a master planned community. And with water and energy, you can of course grow a lot more food. So design as an integrated system, plan for a discrete population. We're planning for 200 people, but as long as you have a discrete population, you're able to match the supply with demand to ensure there's zero waste. and the provision of infrastructure, food, water, energy, shared vehicles, housing, entertainment, workspaces, then provides for those people. It also provides work opportunities within the village, so you're creating a local economic system, and it demands collaborative governance, so it's essentially an entire political economy, a local political economy within, in and around a village and its scale environment. Our plan is for 40 hectares of total site area and about 5 hectares to be rezoned for the co-living and co-working space. We're currently working with rural councils to set up the planning policies to enable this to happen. The idea of zoning it is, of course, to fit in with the planning regime, and agriculture, of course, would permeate the built environment as well as even out into the wildlife management zone. So yeah, that's done just for planning reasons. And the design also involves choosing appropriate locations, working with various partners, including local authority, infrastructure designers and providers, architects, future residents to co-design and so on. Setting up the planning processes to ensure replicability, because that's what gives certainty for future residents and investors to buy in and enable it and fund it. We need to think about ownership structures. Do we continue to subdivide for individual ownership and then create competing stakeholders over the land, or do we set up a collective ownership structure? And also financing structures. So rather than everyone individually financing themselves, there's new models of fractal real estate ownership and investment that allow collective financing models to be developed. So our broader vision is we are planning for a network of high-tech regenerative villages that strive towards self-sufficiency and zero waste within their bioregion. Each village will house a diverse community of up to 200 people and will integrate affordable co-working and co-living spaces with water and energy microgrids and a regenerative agricultural system. And that article was published last year outlining the system as a whole. And the quote that I like to end on is that we shape our cities and thereafter they shape us. And that's it. So I'll just stop that share.
Great. Fantastic. Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Stephen. That was really fantastic, and it's a great vision. And yeah, can't wait to see the first one of these circular regenerative villages come into existence. I'm sure lots of people will be really keen to go and be part of creating that with you and Nilmini and your colleagues.
It'll have to be a collaborative effort.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we are running a little bit behind time, but I do really want to make space for Councillor Jess Miller from the City of Sydney before handing back to Bruna to talk a little bit about the game that we're going to do in the last part of this workshop. So Jess is distinguished for many reasons, one of which being elected to the City of Sydney in 2016 as one of the youngest ever persons to hold elected office. At the City of Sydney, she served as Deputy Lord Mayor from 2017 to 2018 and is currently Deputy Chair of the Environment Committee and the Cycling Advisory Committee. Amongst other things, Jess is known for her creative and inclusive approaches to sustainability, strategy and innovation. She co-founded Green Up Sustainability Drinks, Grow It Local and the Elizabeth Street Gallery, and she's worked on the Garage Sale Trail, Tweed Ride and Grow Show, which featured an enormous veggie patch and education programs outside Melbourne Town Hall. And she is originally from Victoria. So very warm welcome to Jess to talk for a few minutes about what is happening in this space in Sydney. Over to you.
Hi everybody. I'll keep it really brief, but it's a pretty exciting week. It began with our local member for Sydney, Alex Greenwich, giving a member's statement in the Upper House of Parliament about the importance of food resilience. And this is really significant because it foreshadows an Upper House inquiry that will begin in March 2021. And so where this has all really come from has been partly due to, I suppose, I mean, COVID has obviously exacerbated things, but one of my frustrations within working within the City of Sydney has been that there's a real kind of attitude within dense urban councils that food security and urban ag is not something that we can easily accommodate, nor should we accommodate in cities. And that's obviously something I completely disagree with. But part of the challenge in raising the status of urban ag, and I guess jumping on the COVID opportunity, was to point out yet again that we have 17,000 people within the City of Sydney, which is a 26 square kilometre radius. We have 200,000 residents. There are 17,000 people who were food insecure pre-COVID. So obviously when COVID struck, the city's response was to, with all the best intentions at heart, alleviate some of that food insecurity through a food charitable model, which helps us deal with the immediate problem, but it's not dealing with the long-term systemic challenges of food security. So a lot of the work that I've been doing over the past probably 3 or 4 years has been trying to point to different examples of what urban agriculture looks like, which can often challenge people and needfully so, because it has to often go beyond the conception that it looks like a community garden. So we've got technology that we need to sort of look at and think about how we can incorporate hydroponics, aquaponics, aeroponics into different spaces. We have to really rail against there being any lazy spaces in cities whatsoever. There's no reason why we shouldn't be growing food in proximity to communities all over the place. I've been trying really hard to understand planning controls and how the planning system can act as a real disabler or potential enabler of urban ag. And so trying to think and look at how buildings are constructed and whether or not they can be done so in a way that thinks about the future, so that instead of having car parks, we could have closed environment agriculture embedded within buildings. And also, I think the most important thing is to acknowledge that the City of Sydney doesn't exist within an island, and that we are a huge part of metropolitan Sydney, but we're not the epicenter of metropolitan Sydney. And that for us to reimagine, or at least acknowledge, the vulnerabilities within the food system, we need to work with the other 33 urban councils that surround us, but more importantly, we need to work with peri-urban and regional councils. And so I guess what I'm really excited about as this sort of conversation progresses and what happens in an upper parliamentary inquiry is that it opens up a conversation amongst a whole range of different stakeholders. So urban communities will have their say. There'll be an opportunity for social entrepreneurs to talk about what's required, what kind of conditions are required to foster innovation and incorporate tech and equity into how we conceive of food systems. We need to invite transport and logistics people, farmers, of course, horticulturalists, water scientists, planners, developers, the whole thing. So, that's the kind of big piece that I'm thinking about. And in the meantime, obviously, our urban greening policy is coming up, and core to that, I think, is really championing this idea of a regenerative city. And it's something that our community tell us that they want. And it's something that people connect to, because we can no longer afford to be parasitic. Cities should not be places that simply extract and take from the environment and from people. They need to be places that replenish. So I think we're at a really, really, really exciting time. And I've never been more optimistic about the thinking that's going on, but am also very aware that we need to jump in and take the opportunity to show people what these fancy ideas look like and really extend that invitation outwards, so that it's something that we're all doing together.
That's fantastic, Jess. Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, great to have your positivity and optimism and what's been a really hard year. And yeah, it is a very exciting time. I agree entirely. Just one quick question by way of indulgence, because I think this is something that probably a lot of people don't know about, but I think is really exciting and visionary if it actually happened, which you maybe could say something about, which was the proposal to de-pave 800 kilometres of roads through Sydney and have a massive expansion of the public realm, and part of that would be urban farms and market gardens. Do you want to say something quickly about that?
Well, there is this kind of concept of depaving that's playing out. It's playing out in different areas. So you've got the public. I think the first step is for people to get their heads around the fact that public land is for public use. And then the next step is kind of engaging them with, well, what do we do with it then, and how do we extract the most amount of value? So I've got construction over the fence, but yeah, it's really exciting. I've got my eye on all the laneways. So there we go.
Fantastic. Okay, thanks very much. Thanks very much, Jess, and huge thank you to everyone who's spoken, Susan, Bruna, Stephen. Okay, so everyone's stayed with us, which is absolutely fantastic. So I think now what we're going to do is just, Bruna, if you just want to quickly give us a couple of minutes on how the game is going to work, and then take an opportunity to stretch legs, get a cup of tea if you want that, and come back in a few minutes. I'm going to put you in breakout rooms, so please don't, if you want to continue and being part of this next phase, the participatory part of today, please don't exit the Zoom, because it will allocate you to, there's one of 4 breakout rooms during the break. But over to you now, Bruna. Thank you, Nick.
So, you know, you heard all the presenters. Now it's going to be your time to talk into these breakout rooms. I hope you have had a chance to look at the Miro board. If you haven't, that's okay. We are going to go straight into it now. So we're all going to play and competing in a collaborative way eventually. So you have allocated scenarios, and you're going to find cards in these scenarios that have been only filled one. There's only one card filled there, which is the challenge card. The other 3 cards, you're going to think it in your groups. So when you completed your scenario, Stephen introduced to us the circular economy matrix, and you're going to find your scenario in the matrix that he described to us during his presentation. And also it's, you know, if you read that story that we shared with you, then you're going to know more about. So if you can choose one person for timekeeping, that's important, and another one to present later to everyone when we go back to the main room, to this main room here. We are going to vote. So after you present your scenario, we are going to have a Mentimeter, and we're going to vote for this to see, you know, what's the best participatory future. The rules of engagement, everyone's voice matters, so don't dismiss anything, build on each other's suggestions, and, you know, keep a look at the clock. And use your imagination, draw, illustrate, unleash your inner child. Right, we are ready. So if you're having a break, then we can go to Miro.
Thanks, thanks, Bruno. Just before we do go on a break, I just want to share with you the Mentimeter. The first question about what type of urban agriculture elements or activity kind of most interests you. So I don't know if everyone can see that, but we had a number of options. From home gardening to verge gardening, community gardening, and so on, as well as all of the above. So it seems that most popular by far is all of the above, followed by community gardening. So everyone here is interested in pretty much everything, it seems like. So yes, as Bruna says, we'll have a second Mentimeter when we conclude the workshop in the breakout room. So it is 1:20. Let's just take, try and keep it to 3 minutes. If you want to go and, you know, stretch your legs, get a cup of tea, something like that. We'll come back shortly before 25 past. Please don't exit the Zoom if you want to continue with us this afternoon. See you in a few minutes. That.
Lots of discussion, lots.
Yeah, good.
Which was the idea.
We were technology challenged in our thing, but we had great discussion about where we were coming from our own spaces. So not much on the Miro board until we worked out how to do it, but great conversations and just networking and listening. So
Excellent.
that was good.
Excellent. All right. Well, let's very quickly, because I realise we're just kind of hard at 2 o'clock. We're just wanting to respect your time. Maybe just a quick sort of snapshots. And we did say we have a little vote just to complete the game. So maybe we can get the vote sort of link up now, Ariana, in the chat. So what people are, most persuaded by in terms of these scenarios for urban agriculture and these challenges that we mapped up. So let's do it in alphabetical order. So why don't you start, Bruna, or somebody from your group, talk about what you did, and I will share the screen so we can all see what's going on. Yeah.
So Anna, you wanna sell a scenario, please?
Yeah. So I think our scenario was.
A.
I cannot move left or right.
Scenario A. Yeah.
Okay. It was on biodiversity loss.
Biodiversity loss. So you use this template over here, right? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Tell us about it.
Yes, we had a very knowledgeable people in the room, I would say, people working with local council, people working with community gardens, volunteers, social entrepreneurs, so very, very diverse. So our problem obviously is that due to urbanization, pesticides, and the fact that we farm the way we do, and we have climate change, then we have a significant decline in biodiversity. And there is room for improvement, and we've come up with a few ways to do that. And I think that the first things that have to happen is we need more space for nature. We need more space for people to learn about it and practice it firsthand, be it in their back garden, be it because the government, local councils allow it, or in this community spaces. And lots of ideas as to how to do that. I think that so giving space is basically also looking at what space we already have available to turn it. Can I just ask how much time I've got before I carry on?
Try and keep it to a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
We don't want to go. We don't want to go too much.
Okay, cool. So we want to. We can do this by diversifying the stock that we have, the things that we plant, looking at indigenous plants as well, looking at creating local nurseries that help you have products that are adapted to the climate and the microclimate, but as well as looking at the available space and turning that so nature strips become actual nature strips. So looking at whatever available green space there's there, you can turn that into a biodiversity space. And that also means planting, sorry, I can't read that small one there. That's a lot to be read. But also we want to encourage peri-urban farmers or farmers in general to move away from monocultures and pesticide use. And here we talked about biomimicry, like looking at how nature works and trying to incorporate diversity into this model and letting nature work for you. And sorry, I'm trying to get to the who. So in order to have this kind of diversity happening, we probably will need to look at like not working in silos, trying to communicate the message across different stakeholders and really tell them what the objective is. So, okay, the objective is we want to improve soil because that improves microbiology and that in turn gives us nutritious food. We want to include corridors for all sorts of other birds and mammals and so forth and insects. So you need to connect that, which means that you need to bring different people at the table and explain or at least manage what everyone wants out of it and how can everyone contribute. And then if you want to, probably the time frame for that is long, like it's hard to regenerate something, which means that you're looking at longer time periods of time. But I think you should break it down into some sort of milestones, and you say, okay, maybe by the second year we have planted X amount of trees, or we have engaged X amount of people, or community groups, so that you slowly working towards your longer term goals. In terms of delivery, make it fun, make it engaging, bring like create hype, bring kids around, make learning for like everyone should learn something. Even if you think you know everything, I still think that there's always new to get together, and this is through all sorts of festivals, all sorts of events. You have to celebrate the diversity that is out there, so then when you see it, you're more likely to be inclined to be attracted to that. And in terms of delivery, I guess you want to make as many tools available for people. Everybody learns differently, everybody engages differently, which means that you should have tailored, like, okay, for students, we have showcases, we have tests, or whatever, not tests, like you bring them, get their hands dirty, but you also make online resources. You help people learn about new techniques. It's not just about general, I mean, all things like indigenous way of growing food, or even indigenous type of plant, what they do, what's their benefits, what is regenerative agriculture, how does it work, how does it connect, or what kind of benefits it brings to the farmers, but also trying to look towards the vulnerable community, so that we don't call them vulnerable anymore. They're just part of the community, and they contribute, because we're all humans and we all have something to bring to the table, which means that if you have cultural diversity, you will have biodiversity as well. But also in all of this, you want to solidify some relationships between the stakeholders that are lasting, and it's not just, oh, the project is over, goodbye, and I never talk to you again. So I guess leaving some legacy behind with every action that you take, or every action that you accomplish, then you try, because ultimately we are here because biodiversity exists. Like if there would be 7 plants, probably we wouldn't be like we wouldn't be here, you know what I mean? So
well
I
said,
guess reminding
that's
that, you know, we thrive because there's this nature is so diverse and resourceful, and probably learn from that. I'm done.
And linking back to the circular economy, we found ourselves in the bottom up.
Okay. Fantastic. That was great. Yeah, great work, and really compelling, and very well summarised, Anna. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so scenario B, who was going to talk about that? This is the health and wellbeing.
Yeah, no, that was me. I must apologise to my group. I was technology challenged for getting the mirror board up, but we did speak just very briefly when I got it all working, that just local stakeholders, local government, and being prepared and proactive. That was one of the things that sort of came out, and just one of the disablers was the grant opportunity and access to money. But just speaking to Jamie, she's up in Weipa in northern northern Queensland, and just the challenges, just speaking to her, and challenges just as well with Anita. We really just engaged that way. So I do apologise, we didn't really do much with the board, but we really had a great conversation.
Fantastic. That's what's most important, Susan. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
It's all about the conversation and the connection and the discussion. All right, so this was ours. I was in this group with looking at climate change and urban agriculture. So we also had a really great chat here. Used a slightly different template to kind of map it out. I don't know if someone from the group wants to speak rather than me. If you say what we talked about here. I guess we're kind of like trying to capture it with the retro suburbia. I don't know if people are familiar with that concept, that work of David Holmgren that came out in 2017. The idea of making the suburbs edible, retrofitting the suburbs, both from an energy and a food perspective. So it kind of like aligns with Sustain's vision, which is making Australian towns and cities edible. So we kind of frame the discussion around that, I guess, is the big picture kind of vision and agenda over a 10-year time frame, and then like sort of thought about, well, what would need to be happening and changing in order to get to that, that vision of edible sort of climate resilient, climate smart, massive network of backyard and public community gardens. So I don't know if Diana or Belinda or Joe or Pooja want to jump in and say anything. No? Okay. Yeah, anyway, we just to kind of, fill in a couple of gaps. I guess we kind of like talked about, the challenges, the need for a mass kind of like culture shift to support this, the question of kind of policy conflicts in councils and state government, conflicting policy priorities. How do you get around that? The need for information and resources, particularly for beginner gardeners, young families, making that more available being a really key gap. And I, kind of landing towards the end there, that bottom sort of quadrant about leadership and the real key role of leadership and at the executive level inside institutions to really support this. So Belinda, I think it was, made a really interesting point about in recruitment for kind of like senior positions in institutions to really seek out people who've got that kind of like background and experience and vision that can really drive that forward. And financing, being really important as well in terms of, resourcing all these kinds of things. And in terms of, the value proposition, where could this get to potentially? Diana talked about, Havana, the experience of Cuba going through kind of like a post-collapse situation in the early 90s, and now getting to a point where as much as 2/3 of fresh food is actually produced within the city limits using permaculture and organoponic urban agriculture techniques. And, Melbourne potentially could, become, somewhere, 50% or more self-sufficient in vegetable production through, a network of, backyard, front yard, birch garden, community garden, school garden, market garden, urban agriculture, and that could be a great way of, getting us ready for the climate emergency and being able to deal with it. So yeah, as well as, food security, resilience, supporting people who are, struggling in, heat waves and those kinds of things. So that's probably enough on that scenario. So just finally, we'll go across to scenario D, which was yours, Stephen, looking at post-growth.
Just unmute. Okay, thanks. So yes, we, as you can see, have a few notes on there in terms of the game itself, but we also had another conversation about the game and about the whole process, which ultimately of the lab itself, which is about developing collaborative relationships in order to work towards a envisioned future. So I think our challenge was a bit different to the others in the sense that it was about a whole of system rather than an individual challenge, which means we have to look at the overall process as well. And so one of the comments, for example, was that we should look at the challenges, but we should also look at the strengths of the community and sort of ask what the people who are collaborating are able to contribute to the outcomes that we're trying to achieve. And in that sense, we're coming into this game, if you like, where it's already half done, and being able to participate in the co-creation from the outset is really important. There was also the comment that some people and that's me included, this wasn't my comment, but I'm much better at place-based approaches rather than abstract games. So when you're looking to develop collaborative relationships, you have to look at how people work as well as what they can do or what they should be doing. There's the broad picture of yes, we all want to move away from critiques and issues with the current system. And so we look to visions for a new system. But there's also, this process is really about developing the steps or the strategy for getting to that vision. And so what are the technologies that we need? What are the partners that we need in order to get to that vision? So being able to sort of articulate that process as what we're trying to achieve is, I think, really important, because we're actually rehearsing the future by creating these collaborative relationships. We're creating that future that we want that is more collaborative and more bottom-up sufficiency approach and peer-to-peer rather than relying on government or advocating to government necessarily. I mean, that can always be part of the picture, but there needs to be a lot more peer-to-peer and bottom-up sufficiency strategies in what we're doing, which is what we're doing in terms of urban agriculture, but just being clear on that, that's what we're trying to achieve. So ours was more a sort of a meta discussion about the game rather than playing the game, although as you can see from the notes, there were plenty of comments about the technologies and the partners that we need, but maybe we're running out of time and I'll just leave it.
Okay. Yeah, thanks very much, Stephen. That's really interesting, those reflections, and yeah, really great to have that feedback in terms of thinking about yeah, the framing of this and you know, this approach. I mean, I think from a design perspective, a design kind of lab perspective, this is, you know, this is one resource amongst many, obviously, and there's lots of different ways that we could proceed with this. And certainly, speaking for Sustain, we want to continue this. For us, this is not simply just kind of like a one-off. You know, this was always conceived as the commencement of a process in terms of the idea of the Urban Agriculture Lab and a co-design process. So would really encourage and welcome everybody who's still with us, everyone else who joined today and has expressed interest in this area, to yeah, send in your thoughts and feedback and suggestions about how we can take it forward, and you know, what are the resources that you're familiar with, and what would be a really, you know, useful and constructive and engaging, enjoyable way of, you know, of taking this work forward over the next months. Yeah, so I guess that's kind of brings us to the end. If we did say we'd ask you to kind of vote on what scenario you thought was most captured you. You can do that offline as well. You know, there's the link that Ariana's just shared. We can share that with some feedback for everybody. People have had to leave at different times, so not everyone's been able to stay to the end, and people want to see these Miro boards and the ideas and things that have been put up there. So we will be obviously sharing that, and perhaps we'll capture, you know, more feedback and input, and make it a bit of an iterative process, so it doesn't necessarily end here. But you know, if there's things that you really want to include, or resources you think would be really valuable, or other things, you can, you know, everybody's got the link. You're very welcome to go in and post them up and add in comments and so on, you know, over the next little while. So just in terms of next steps for us, we've got a major series of webinars coming up in December that we're going to be working on now, with a place in the world where there has been a whole of food and farming system approach to food, to agriculture, in a very collaborative, multi-stakeholder, you know, structured, planned, coordinated, resourced way. And that is in Vermont, the Vermont Farm to Plate Plan. We're going to be launching some publicity and promotion about that, hopefully next week or very early the week after. we are lucky to have the director of the Vermont Farm to Plate Plan will be joining us for those webinars, talking about the lessons of 10 years of collaborative, structured, whole of system approach involving 350 different partner organisations across the whole state of Vermont, and what the lessons and learnings and achievements of that have been, and then go in two further webinars into more detail about land use planning, urban planning, farmland protection, and the intersection of that with food access and food security. And then in a final webinar on the 16th of December, it will be about procurement and logistics and the progress they've been able to make on that particular part of the food system problematic. So that will be in December. So we'll send you all details of that. And then we want to continue these Urban Ag Labs every month, probably starting in late January, going through to the Urban Agriculture month in April and beyond. And that will be linked with our campaign for our action agenda for transformation of Australia's towns and cities to really support mass expansion of edible gardening. So yeah, we're committed to continuing this and working with partners right around the country to translate what's already happening and other ideas into reality. Yeah, please please join us in that effort. Continue being part of this process. If you like what we do and support us, consider becoming a member of Sustain. Sign up for our newsletter if you're not already getting it, and stay in touch. So yeah, just want to finish on that note. If anyone's got any final comments, feel free to speak them or write them. But yeah, thank you very much for your time today and everything that you've contributed. It's been really fantastic. And a big thank you, of course, to Bruna, Susan, Stephen, and Ariana, who've been the team who've worked on it with me and putting it all together.
Thanks, Nick. Nick, could I make one comment in terms of next steps and future labs? I think it would be great to work on specific projects, like, for example, Susan's satellite market gardens, and how we could facilitate that, or even your fund that you're proposing. Who are the partners that we need to get together to make those things happen? I think having the labs be about specific projects that people are trying to get off the ground would be really useful. Yeah, that's a great suggestion, Stephen. Yeah, I think that's a really fantastic idea. Yeah, we intended, certainly intended this to be a kind of also, connecting and information sharing. So wanting to, probably next time not having so many presenters and having more time for discussion rather than, getting that balance a little bit adjusted, but definitely wanting to make space for, for others who are doing things such as the Mini Urban Farm Project, which has become the most recent member organisation to sustain what they're doing in Southeast Queensland as a, example of an organisation that's, creating new market gardens and how they're doing it and what kind of supports they need. So, yeah, we do want to, kind of have this as a space where people can learn about, great people doing great things around the country. But yeah, your idea about actually then kind of like workshopping particular, projects or initiatives that, yeah, we can contribute to in this kind of co-design process, I think it's a really great one. All right, if there's no one else who wants to say anything, I think we'll leave it there. We'll share everything with everyone, the recording, the Miro boards. And
you have the voting, is that up now?
On the voting, I can tell you the votes are in, at this point at least, Bruna, I can tell you what's happened. And I think Anna has, yeah, there's only been 5 votes. But Anna is the one who has triumphed with her her scenario. Everyone else got 1 vote, and Team A got 2 votes. So there you go. Preliminary votes only.
Second part, yeah.
All right, okay.
Thank you,
we'll leave
everyone.
it there. Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
And you too. Okay. Thank you.
All right, bye.